What I'd like to do right now is describe the leaving process and the being left behind process for people in the breakup. The idea of going over the waterfall in the barrel or getting on the long train ride. Let's say both parents in the relationship have 1,000 pounds of weight on their shoulders. The person leaving the relationship actually goes through all of the stuff in this first box. Doubt, vacillation, indecision, resentment, anger, sadness, mourning the loss of the dream, fear, anxiety, denial of the reality of the relationship, withdrawal, bargaining to change the relationship, guilt, depression, shattered hopes and dreams, and finally, resignation. That's the leaving process. It's the grieving that goes on. We talked about that earlier. When somebody is grieving, that's the process they go through. A lot of times people going through the grieving process may not be able to put a finger on what's going on. I used to have parents come into my office, or actually couples, I should say, because some did not have children, and I walked them through paperwork that helped them put their divorce on paper that went to the court so they could be done. These were people that could agree with each other on child sharing. These were people that could agree with each other on dividing assets and debts and moving on. I did 850 of those divorces by myself. Whenever I had the couple together, or even one person alone, I walked them through this chart. Now, Lynette Trier wrote a book called Learning to Leave. In that book, she put this chart. She used to come in and do presentations for parents and couples in our program before she ended up moving to another location. But she would come in and work with the people being left behind or those people that were leaving and help negotiate their way through the process. The grieving process goes to both people being left behind and the one leaving. It's just the one leaving drops about 700 pounds before they make the announcement. But now the announcement's made. The person being left behind before the announcement was made was really clueless. They may have said to the other person, is everything okay? And the person leaving may not know they're leaving, says, yeah, I guess so. I think I'm just tired, or I don't know, maybe I'm just having problems at work, because you can't articulate the leaving process until you get to the very end. One time I went through the chart with a woman, and I went through all the leaving part, and she said, oh, now I get it. That's me. That's what happened. I just woke up and knew I was done, but I didn't know that I was going there when I first started that journey. And that's the train ride that you can't get off of. So 1,000 pounds of weight for the person being left behind and before the announcement is made is about maybe dropping 200 pounds at the very most. That person has some sense of something amiss. They may have fear and confusion. They may actually deny the situation, like the father I talked about a minute ago, when mom says, but I told you in December I was done. I felt like killing myself. Well, he termed it as maybe she's having a mental breakdown, not leaving the marriage. And then they have a strong need for reassurance because remember, that person's been pulling away. They see the relationship as permanent and severe. They see themselves as running parallel lives. And the other person left behind is going, is everything okay? And the other person's going, yeah, I guess so. Well, maybe they're afraid to tell him, or like I said, they may not know what's going on. Now, after the announcement is made, the person leaving has a sense of euphoria. They have some guilt because of the reaction of the announcement. They may have some shame, and they may fear that they are going to repeat themselves in another relationship again and fail. They may have continued feelings of grief and loss. They may be disoriented related to their identity shift because they're having trouble shifting. They may have second thoughts. Maybe I was wrong. Now, those are things that happen in the breakup when the person leaving leaves. And then later on, assuming that they have a normal breakup, then they have more stability and peace of mind and acceptance and finally serenity. Now, The person, though, being left behind, depending on their personality style, depending on whether there's a personality conflict or defect, or they're just really have so much pain in their life they can't let go, they go through what we call the fast roller coaster ride. Shock, pain, denial of the reality of the breakup, loss of attachment, disrupted sleep, inability to concentrate, anger, rage, identity confusion, sadness, despair, disillusionment, fear, loss of trust, bargaining to regain the relationship, depression, loss of stability, sense of failure and guilt, desire for retribution and revenge, need for compensation, resignation, and finally, much later, acceptance. Now, normally, in a regular breakup, they say it's about a 2-year period of time for the person being left behind to really get back on their feet. The person that is being left behind, if they're in a normal breakup situation and go through some of this without it being highly conflictual, will finally adjust and come to grips with it. That's about 75% of the population. Unfortunately, we're not talking about those people. We're talking about the people that cannot accept the breakup. They cannot accept that the other person is leaving them, and that is when they get stuck in a stage of retribution and revenge. They get stuck in anger and rage. They get stuck in loneliness. How could you do this to me? The father I described a few minutes ago that was just driving his daughters over the barrel in the waterfall, over the waterfall, they would complain that Dad would just not stop talking about how he'd been rejected, how Mom was programming them to not be with him, and how life was really painful. And he was going back and talking about how his childhood was interfering with his relationship, and all the stuff he was talking about, of course, was probably true, or to some degree true when it comes to the childhood relationship. I didn't see that Mom had done anything to try to keep the father away. I saw her as really working hard in this relationship. She was really torn up when the judge took Dad's time away for 2 weeks to give the girls a break and asked for me to write a report. Dad's response was a 12-page letter about how bad I was and how I was biased and how I didn't work with him and how I told him that there was all sorts of information that he put in the paper that wasn't even correct. So that stuff has been going on for 3 years. He isn't adjusting. The family can't adjust because he keeps coming in and making it so difficult for the girls to have a wonderful relationship with him. Instead, they're having to act like they're running interference all the time, protecting themselves from more pain and being dumped over the waterfall. That's an example. In high conflict breakups, I have a couple right now that's actually thinking about getting back together again. She spent $80,000 separating from him. He spent a little bit more than that. Now they're talking about maybe being able to work the relationship out. Neither one of them ever went through the grief and loss because of the conflict. Now they're trying to figure out whether for the kids' sake they can get back together again. That's a tough one. I'm working with them, but it's pretty touch and go. It's pretty painful to watch that both of them went over the barrel, but it was more like they were forced to. There was some emotional abuse and there were some other issues. So I'm not sure that the relationship will work. I'm pretty sure that Mom and Dad have never grieved the loss of each other in a healthy way. So I'm wondering if either this is going to be the way that they work on their relationship and heal, or whether it allows them to finally let go. We'll see. So if you were the one leaving or the one being left behind, hopefully you can recognize yourself in this and understand more about the leaving and the being left behind process and what may have happened to you. As I said way back when we were talking about guilt and loss, it's really important to be able to grieve the things that occurred for you. You couldn't help it if you got on the train, or the person who left you, they can't help it. They didn't really plan to leave the relationship. It's the nature of the structure of the relationship. We go back to being friends first. Having an abusive relationship is not a friendship. Having an abusive relationship is the opposite. It's the bids that are always failing. The one loyal person's trying to figure out a way to get that person to turn toward them, and they just keep refusing because they don't know how. They're not able to learn. They're not willing to learn. So there you go, the divorce process.